Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I see so many of you have come really promptly on time here. Thank you. So come in, make yourself comfortable, get familiar with this platform. And we'll start in about 2 minutes, officially. Okay, fantastic. You can use the chat anytime. You can use the questions. Chat is public. Questions only come to us. So depending on what you want to say, go right ahead.
Hopefully all good things.
All good things, yes. Tell us how the weather's doing in Peters Township or city of Pittsburgh or wherever you hail from. Okay, we'll wait 1 more minute and then kick off.
Sounds good.
We have someone in the chat feeling good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Always need somebody to break the ice. I appreciate it. All right. Power Up. This is called Fortinet Power Up. So the concept behind Power Up is generally, like everything in life, you end up using a small fraction of your possibilities most of the time. And the thinking is if you could just expand your repertoire just a little bit, you will become much more powerful. And that goes with everything in life, and certainly with our Fortinet platform. So Jake is here from Fortinet. Introduce yourself, Jake, please.
Sure. Here, I'll even get to my nice little slide that has this. All right. Let me know if you can see that.
It's coming up. And oh, okay.
Alrighty. So my name is Jake Bartow. I know a couple of you guys are my current customers, so you're familiar with me, but I am the sled systems engineer with Fortinet. I work alongside Jason Lee covering K-12, higher education, and government customers. I've been at Fortinet for a little over 4 years, and previous to Fortinet, I was in the partner community and then also on the customer side. And for those of you who are veterans, happy belated Veteran Day. I was in the Army for 8 years, I guess, on the contract. So thank you for your service. And
thank you for your service. And if you could just do a little show of hands, I find, Jake, your audio is a little bit kind of like a wave. I don't know whether it's just my ears. If someone could just put in the chat whether you hear Jake okay. So make sure you all can hear him okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Brian is
keep going?
Yep, of course. Go ahead.
Okay. So I have in here my contact information if you guys don't already have it. So if you guys have questions after today, you have my email and my phone number. Feel free to reach out.
Okay. So 2 out of 3 people say they hear you okay. 1 says choppy. Let's keep going, and that's good.
Here, let me drop off video to see if that makes any difference.
Great.
And then maybe I won't break anybody's cameras.
Good.
All right. So wanted to talk a little bit about our Fortinet security fabric today and how we have a lot of different products that integrate and share intelligence across the Fortinet fabric. So we're talking about the FortiGate today, which is in the secure networking pillar there on the left, but we also have the unified SASE pillar as well as security operations. This is just a subset of the products that we do cover. and there's within the Fortinet Security Fabric, we have integrations into these products. So the more you invest in the Fortinet Security Fabric, the more intelligence you share, the more dynamic your environment becomes, and the more capable you are to respond to anything that happens within your network environment. So as opposed to other organizations or other solutions that are siloed that may provide really good coverage in one area or another, um, the direction that a lot of organizations and Gartner and Forrester and all these other folks are talking about are fabric or matrix, where that intelligence is shared across the platform. So what you're seeing at the endpoint is getting notified to your firewall. What you see out in the cloud is getting notified to your endpoints, vice versa, and et cetera. So sharing that intelligence to make your environment very dynamic and be able to withstand new threats and attack vectors. So before I jump onto the morning routine, just wanted to check that audio is good.
Yeah, it's good enough.
Okay.
It's good. And I'll just say, as before we go through, Jake is going to show you some real practical demo applications of how you can do lots of tips and tricks and ways to go about things. If you this is being recorded, so you can always go back, and if you didn't catch something, you can also type any questions in the chat or in the questions. And if it's not a curveball, I will certainly interject and ask Jake about it as we go through it. And also at the end, we will have time for questions. So off you go.
Awesome. All right, so this is Jake's take on morning routine and what I would suggest that you do when you're sipping on your morning coffee. So nothing really too crazy on the FortiGate side, but mostly on understanding the threats in your environment and what's out in the wild. So we have our FortiGuard team, which is our threat intelligence organization. So those are the folks who are writing AV and IPS signatures, as well as some stuff like we have here on our outbreak alerts and threat signal reports. So what these are, if you're not aware, are so our outbreak alerts are current exploits that we're seeing in the wild. And this gives you in-depth details with CVE entries, background on it, IOC information, as well as additional breakdown in accordance with the MITRE attack framework. You can also sign up for outbreak alerts here. So when you do get this deck, you guys can click on sign up for email alerts, put in your information, and you'll get alerted anytime an outbreak alert is sent. So if you're curious as to what these actually look like, so this is our FortiGuard Outbreak Alert Center. So this is just our single landing page that takes all of the outbreak alerts that we have currently posted. So we have one here for the I believe it's Malik's ransomware. So I'll just take a look at this. But this gives us some general information as to what the ransomware is, what CVEs it's associated to, and a little bit of background on that on the threat. We also post things like the CVSS score, if it's known to be exploited, and then the exploit prediction score. We can also take a look into things like our analysis, solutions. So this is more so mapped to the MITRE attack framework, from protect all the way to identify. Threat intelligence, as well as references. And if you do hit subscribe on here, it takes you to that same email subscription that I posted in the presentation. But if we take a look at solution, for example, for this specific ransomware, we come into IPS and we go to Fortigate. This will take us to all of the IPS signatures associated with this ransomware. So if I want to take a look at this specific IPS signature, and I want to see if, okay, do I have this signature in my IPS database? If we scroll down to the bottom here, we'll see version updates. And this version is the database version that the signature is added to. So you can see it's covered in the regular IPS database as well as the extended database. So if you're looking to see, okay, are we protected from this specific exploit, that's how you can check to see if it's in there. You can also go into the FortiGate itself, into the IPS entries, and search for it there additionally. So in addition to outbreak alerts, our threat signal report is the emerging issues and trends. So not necessarily something that we're currently seeing exploited widely in the wild, but we would definitely see it trending in that direction. So just like the outbreak alerts, again, this is our threat signal. So this is just saying, hey, we're seeing this information start to ramp up. So like, for instance, there's a Veeam backup exploit that's associated with this CVE. And we're giving you, hey, this is what the vulnerability is. If there's anything from a mitigation perspective, and in this case, Veeam has a KB article, as well as some patches associated with it. But additionally, what FortiGuard coverage is available. So in this case, we have an IPS signature for Veeam backup. So if we were to take this and plug this into the intrusion prevention file here, and we search it, it'll tell us, hey, this is the IPS database that has this signature, and you can check to see if you're protected from that particular threat signal report. So those are some things to just be aware of. Hey, this is what's happening outside of my organization and in the wild, and things I should be aware of. Additionally, it's important to have the custom dashboard capabilities on the FortiGate so that you can customize the dashboard to provide you relevant information for your environment. So this is just something I put together that was just my environment. Again, I have a very simple lab environment at home, but you can see I'm still getting details, right? So I've got top system events. I had in here configuration change within 24 hours. So it kind of gives you an idea of, okay, has a configuration change been made in the last 24 hours? Am I aware of it? Am I not? What kind of threats are we seeing from a threat level perspective? What assets do I have that have vulnerabilities that I can go to remediate? Do I see any botnet activity? So this is just something to give you an idea of, I want to be able to take my dashboards that I have in the FortiGate and customize them so that they provide me relevant information. So at a quick glance, I can take a look to see if anything seems out of the ordinary, or at least give me a general health check of my network and my fabric. And then finally, from the custom dashboard perspective, in addition, we do have reports that you can use through FortiAnalyzer or FortiGate Cloud. So if you guys have those configurations today, you can go in to create either custom reports, or we do have some canned reports that you can leverage as well. So those are in there, and you can set those off to shoot you an email like every morning and say like, hey, here's your top talkers, here's what's happening in your environment, and it's in a nice PDF form that you can look through. So now that you guys have finished your first cup of coffee and you're looking to get your second, let's jump into an automation stitch. So I think my customers have heard me talk about this before, but the automation stitch.
Okay, I'm just sorry, there is a little chat, okay? Are the exploits and vulnerabilities an automatic feature, or is that a subscription to add to the FortiGate?
So the IPS signatures are part of the security bundles or the subscriptions that you pay for. So when you have the FortiGate, you have the ATP, UTP enterprise bundles. Those have things like IPS signatures, AV signature updates, web filter updates. So that's what you're paying for, is the updates to include those signatures. The extended and the standard database, if that's what they're asking about, all that is just a radio button in the IPS configuration to download additional IPS signatures.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep. All right. So automation stitches, they're there to automate the activities between different components in your security fabric. The purpose of these is to decrease the response time and to automate responses that happen consistently. So if you've got specific events in your network that require the same action over and over again, we can leverage an automation stitch to alleviate your interaction to handle those. So for instance, I have an HA failover event here where I want to trigger on any sort of syslog for an HA failover, and my action is I want to send out an HA failover email to notify my administrators that, hey, an HA event has occurred. You may want to look into this and make sure that everything is functioning properly. So the two pieces that I just reviewed there that make the automation stitch are the trigger and the action. And the trigger is the condition or event on the FortiGate that activates the action, for example, a specific log or a failed login attempt. And then the action is, of course, what the FortiGate does in response to that trigger. So what does this look like in practice? So if we come into Security Fabric and automation, you can see that there are some sample automation stitches that come out of the box. You can edit these and make changes to them as you see fit. So for instance, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, let's run through a high CPU automation stitch. So I want to get notified whenever a high CPU event happens. So I have a high CPU trigger that I'm going to apply. And then my action, I can have multiple actions here, and I can have them be sequential or parallel. So if I want to take different actions based on the trigger, you can do that. So I've got my trigger here, which is my high CPU utilization. I want to send an email, but I don't necessarily see one that fits what I'm looking for. So these are some actions that you can define, anything from a CLI script to maybe like an AWS Lambda function or Microsoft Teams notification if you integrate your Microsoft Teams into the FortiGate. So we can take an email here, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm just going to name this high CPU. I'm going to identify my email. So I'm going to just put in my work email. And as the subject, I'm just going to say high CPU. So when it comes across, it's just going to say high CPU from a no reply at fortinet.com. So there is a email gateway that is built in with the FortiGate. Not a lot of people know that, but if you set this up, you just send to your email address. It will go out, and when this occurs, it'll send it to that email gateway, and then it'll forward it to you from that no reply at fortinet.com email. And then I've given it the subject of high CPU, and the body in this case is just going to be the log that triggered it. So it's just going to give me the log output so that I can go take a look. But I can also change this to include different information. So I'm going to hit OK, make sure that that's added. And so you see, as soon as I added that action, I can add another one, and that's in a sequential order, or I can do it in parallel. So I'm going to say sequential and just hit OK. So now I can see that I have my high CPU automation stitch all ready to go, and it's enabled. So if I have a high CPU event that triggers the automation stitch, I'll get an email just saying, hey, there's a high CPU utilization. Maybe go take a look at it. So you can get really creative with these. I have a couple libraries that I've included in the presentation that you guys can take a look at on GitHub that some users have put together, one of which is our CSA Victor Weiss. So if you're looking for, hey, how can I get kind of creative with these automation stitches, you can reference those to get you started.
Awesome.
All right. So moving along, Sandbox. So some people are familiar with Sandbox, others aren't. Sandboxing is a technology that's been around for a while and it kind of faded out, but it's coming back. But sandboxing is a practice of taking a virtual environment that emulates like a Windows device or Windows Server, Linux, Mac OS, etc. And then we take files and extensions that come through on the network and we send them to that virtual environment to quote unquote detonate them or execute them. And then we check to see if that file or executable is going to create or try and take malicious action, or if it's just benign and it's just a file that we can ignore and move on. So Fortinet, because they see sandboxing as an essential feature in order to protect your networks, we include it in all of our bundles. So these are the bundles I was mentioning before. So we have Enterprise, UTP, and ATP. If you see anything that has the advanced malware protection or AMP, this is a portion that makes up that AMP subscription. So it is FortiGate Cloud Sandbox, so it is a SaaS offering. And again, Sandbox is very effective at finding and protecting against zero-day attacks because, again, we're not just trying to match it on an IPS signature or an AV signature. We're actually sending it to a VM, detonating it, and seeing, okay, what kind of malicious activity is this going to do? So, real quick, how do we do that? So, under Security Fabric connectors, there is a sandbox tile. So in this case, I have FortiGate Cloud, but you just come in here and you click Enable, and you choose Fortinet Sandbox Cloud. And as long as you've got that entitlement through subscription, you'll have this as an option. And then you just choose your region. And right now I have inline scanning because I'm licensed for it, but from just the SaaS perspective, inline scanning is not an option at the time. So once we've established the Sandbox Fabric connector, we come into our security profiles and antivirus, and I actually have one created here. And this is the Sandbox profile that I've created. I have it in proxy mode. So anything that you see this red P next to gives me the additional capabilities. So if I go back to Flowbase, you see that those disappear. It's the way that the proxy function works that we're able to provide additional capabilities. So in this case, I have Fortinet Sandbox toggle turned on here. Post transfer is going to be the only option you have with Fortinet Sandbox Cloud. But because there are limits on how many you can send per day, the best practice is to choose suspicious files only. You can send all files, but you'll probably reach your limit fairly quickly, especially for a large organization. And if you want to make any exemptions, you can come in here and you can exempt, hey, I want to not look at Chrome extensions or GIF images, for example. So you can get to that level of detail, and then once you have identified your antivirus profile, you come into your policy and you just apply it as a security profile. So in this case, I just have antivirus, I turned it on, and I chose the Sandbox antivirus profile. So now any files that are passing through my policy that have the antivirus security profile turned on that seems suspicious will get sent up to our Fortinet Sandbox Cloud instance. And just some quick details on Fortinet Sandbox. So this is all off of 2022 data, but as of 2022, by taking email attachment, web contents, and network share files, putting them into our Fortinet Sandbox cloud environment or on-prem Fortinet Sandbox instances that agree to send us telemetry data or signatures. Of those 400 million files that are analyzed daily, we've found 14 million malware variants, 22,000 ransomware variants, and 200,000 zero-day variants. So it is very useful and very capable at finding these 0 days, as you can see. And then when we get these triggers, we go in and we update things like our IPS signatures or AV signatures, depending upon the type of malware that's detected. And of course, not all files are malicious. Some are clean. And if no suspicious behavior is detected, we just send it right on through. And I mentioned that there are daily limits to this. So I just wanted to let you guys have this table. I can always send this to you in our official documentation. But the way that this works is, let's say you have a FortiGate 600E, so you fall into this tile here. So we can see that we can send up 20 files per minute or nearly 29,000 files per day. And of course, we do have this capability across other products, but you can take a look at this at your own pace. All righty. So moving into Fabric connectors. We jumped into it a little bit earlier, but Fabric connectors provide integration with multiple Fortinet products and solutions. So this was just that tile view that you saw earlier. But what this shows is it shows our security fabric setup, some of the details of it, but it also shows logging and analytics. So in this case, this is for FortiAnalyzer. Anything that we have from like a FortiClient EMS perspective for maybe some of our remote users or remote access devices. Central management if you're leveraging FortiManager. And then we have additional supported connectors for things like NAC and Mail, Deceptor, if you guys are looking into honeypots. So there's some fabric connectors that we can establish so that we can share intelligence information between our solution sets. So just real quick, if you haven't played around with it before, we go into security fabric connectors. It looks like my EMS went down for some reason, but you can see in here that it's giving me, okay, now it's back up. But you can see that I've got this connected to my EMS cloud instance. I'm getting threat feed intelligence from it, as well as synchronizing firewall addresses. So if I've got a remote user that's VPN back into the FortiGate, and it's got a firewall address associated with it, it'll tell me, okay, not only is this firewall address being used, but here's the user that it's associated with. And same thing in the security fabric. We can take a look at things like which interfaces I'm listening to for devices to join my security fabric. I can define if this is the fabric root or if I'm joining an existing fabric. And then you can manage things like your management IP and subnet, as well as that management port. So hopefully you all are using some version of the fabric connectors, because that's, as you add more Fortinet solutions into your fabric, it does compound the value that you get out of it, because you are doing intelligence sharing. You're not doing siloing of solutions. And for instance, if you have NAC, like a FortiNAC solution in your environment, and you're sharing tags, excuse me. Okay. And you're sharing tags, if you have a device that's a security camera, for instance, and you create a security camera tag, you can build policy as a address object that says, okay, this is a security camera. I can build policy off of this specific tag rather than IP addresses. So if you add additional security cameras or you remove them, it's a dynamic object that we can then build static policy off of. So that is where fabric connectors come into play. But we also have external connectors, and our external connectors provide integration with multiple SDNs, cloud and partner technology platforms, such as our VMware ESXi environments or Nutanix or Kubernetes containers. And then if you have any AWS or Azure, GCP installations, we can integrate with them and we can build policy off of those specific groups that you create up in those cloud instances. And we do have things like our endpoint identity. So if you want to look at our Fortinet SSO agent on Windows Active Directory, this is how you would set that up. Same thing for Radius for RSSO. And then we have things like threat feeds where we can take IP addresses and domain names, and we can create additional groups that we can build policy off of. So for instance, I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you how to create a threat feed. So if we come into external connectors, and I have one here, but essentially it's, you go in, you establish, so if I go to create new, I would just choose IP address, and it's going to show you kind of the same thing that we have here, but I just named it AWS IP blacklist, and it's an external feed, and this just goes to an S3 bucket that has a list of IP addresses that I want to block. So in this case, it's 530 entries. So if you wanted to see what those entries were, you just click on the entries, view entries over here, and you can take a look at that. So after we've created the threat feed, this actually comes in as a DNS filter. So we come into DNS, and I've created yet another profile. Again, just named it the same thing, AWS IP blacklist. I've basically kept this the same as default, but I've come down here and I've turned on the external IP block list radio button, and I've chosen, in this case, the only IPS or the IP threat feed that I have. So now anything that has this DNS filter profile associated with it will also scan it against that list of IP addresses. So if I come back in here and just like I did earlier, go to my policy and objects, firewall policy, and then I apply my DNS filter here to my policy. Alrighty. So not only do we have those external connectors, but we also have an ecosystem of Fabric partners. So these are not necessarily built in like into the Fabric connectors or the external connectors that you saw earlier, but we do have integrations with them. So Fortinet in general, we would love to win all of your business, but we know that you guys have investments and interests elsewhere. So we try to play well with others, and we have different levels of partner ecosystems. So for instance, we have Fabric connectors, which are Fortinet developed connectors into things like ServiceNow or VMware ESX, ESXi, AWS, Azure, etc. And then we have some Fabric APIs, which is our partner developed integrations into our security fabric. And we have over 360 other Fabric ready partners, other than the ones that are just mentioned here. So if you're using something like Tufin or CrowdStrike or Dragos in those OT environments, or Siemens or Schneider Electric, we have integrations into those solutions as well. Usually those are just white pages that you can search on our customer-facing website. But if you need help finding them or you're curious, please reach out to myself or your Fortinet SE. Additionally, we have Fabric DevOps. So these are community-driven DevOps scripts. So if you're doing security provisioning or network provisioning, or I guess it's network as infrastructure or code, that's where these Fabric DevOps pieces come into play. And then additionally, because we do post our APIs, we have integrations into other vendor technologies and open systems as well. So just wanted to mention that we do have those integrations and capabilities for integrations into investments that you've already made. So again, trying to make your investment go further. Moving on to security ratings. The security rating basically takes a look at your security fabric and gives you an idea of how you're doing in regards to other organizations that identify in the same vertical as you. So for instance, if you're in education vertical, it'll put you into the same comparison as other education vertical clients. So in the security rating, we have security posture as well as fabric coverage and optimization. So how well is your security posture? And it breaks it down into subcategories. Fabric coverage, how are you doing in your overall fabric? And then optimization, how optimized is your policy, and are there changes that you can make to improve it? So if we come back over here to our security fabric, security rating, so you can see that mine ran about 45 minutes ago, and it gives you some general information like device types and topology of your environment. But if I come in here to security posture, one of the first things I like to point out to customers is the drop down over here. So this drop down is taking a look at your security posture against these three, I guess, well, in this case, it's Fortinet security best practices, PCI compliance, and CIS. So right now I'm just doing Fortinet security best practices. I have over 500 security controls that I'm getting looked into. So in this case, I go to the 55 failed, and I take a look to see what all I failed on. And it gives you a score, and it tells you, hey, if you change this, this will increase you by 150 points. So in this case, there's a PCERT that's out for Open SSH regression. So there's a device in my environment that could be susceptible to it, so I need to make sure that I update that device so that I address that PCERT. If you see anything with an easy button, this is just a quick way of automatically applying that fix. So for instance, in this rogue AP detection, if I come over here, it says set a WIDS profile for rogue AP detection on the following AP profiles. If I just hit apply, it's going to go ahead and do that on my behalf. And when I rerun this scan, it's actually going to increase my score by 90 points. So this is just a quick way of saying, okay, how can I quickly address security posture optimization by leveraging things like this easy button, or by giving me some sort of idea of where I need to spend some time to harden my environment. So whether that's security posture or maybe doing some optimization. So do I have redundant ISLs for my switches that are downstream? Have I turned off PoE supply side to PoE supply side so I don't have any weird switch power issues that are occurring? So it just gives you some things to think about and work towards to make sure that your environment is not just functioning properly and optimized properly so you're getting the most out of your investment, but also that your security posture is as good as you can get. So this is a really good way to at least start taking a look at hardening and best practices from your organization view. Okay. So the next piece is probably by far the most important. And this is deep packet inspection or SSL decrypt, depending upon what you call it. I know that this can be daunting and it can be a little nerve-wracking to talk about because there's a lot of concern about end user disruption, but I'll show you how easy it is, and it's not as difficult as you might think. So deep SSL inspection is increasingly important. Why? Google estimates as of May 2023 that over 90% of HTTP traffic is encrypted, and Apnic Labs is seeing that over 10% of DNS traffic is encrypted in the US alone. So what does that mean? That means that our existing filtering and AV and IPS solutions are way less effective without SSL decryption. Why? So if we come over here and we take a look at these two Google form links. So without SSL decryption, the only thing that we can see is the header. So in this case, we see that it's a Google Forms link and it's a Google Forms link. Both are categorized in our web filter as web-based applications. And based off of this information, this looks benign. But if we look further, are the URLs actually safe? And the answer is one is and one is not. So with SSL decryption, we can actually take a look at the file path and see, okay, we see that it's a Google Forms link, but what is it actually? Is it just a regular Google Form link that's benign, and in this case, this is safe? Or is it phishing? Is it going to lead to something that's going to try and harvest some information from me that it's going to then utilize to, exploit my network? So by decrypting, we're able to see what kind of actual link it is. So in this case, I have a pretty low-level example, but I think it does a really good job explaining the difference in what you see from an SSL perspective. So if I come in here to my security events and web filtering, and I do a little bit of adjusting, and let's say I want to go to, I don't know, milkshakefactory.com because everybody loves milkshakes. And I want to come in here and I want to take a look at franchise, but I also want to look at locations. And I want to say, okay, I want to look at the Panama City Beach location. So I've gone to the Milkshake Factory address and I've gone to franchise and locations. Let's see what we can find. So if I come in here to URL, I type in, let me come back here and refresh. I can see that I've got some traffic here for the Milkshake Factory. So as you can see, all I'm seeing here is the URL or the header, right? So we're just seeing the domain of milkshakefactory.com. And even though I've traversed other pages, it's just showing me that header information. Now, if I come in here to my with me 1 second. Policy ID. So if I come back to my policy and objects, that policy that I was showing earlier is my SSL decrypt policy. So I've taken the certificate in my SSH profile. So if I come in here to my custom deep inspection profile, what I've done is I've taken this CA cert that exists on the FortiGate and I've downloaded it and I've put it on my, in this case, my desktop's browser. So when I go to browse and I encrypt my traffic with this SSL cert, what ends up happening is the FortiGate will do the deep inspection. It'll decrypt it with that CA cert so that we can take a look at the unencrypted payload of that packet and of that communication. So now instead of applying IPS filters based off of just headers, we can actually apply it to the full payload. So come back in here. So I'm going to go onto my desktop over on the side here, and I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to go to franchise, and I'm going to go to locations, and then I'm going to choose a new location. And we're going to see if we can find what location I went to. So if I come in here, I go to URL, I come to Milkshake Factory again. What you can see is you can see the policy that I have here that's test or 21. This is the non SSL decrypt. This is just using flow-based inspection. So all you can see is the Milkshake Factory domain. In my SSL decrypt policy, I can see that there's a lot more going on and that I can follow the full path of the URL. So in this case, I've got some search engine stuff through Google. I can see that I went to apparently a JPEG load.
And Jake, I have a question here.
Sure.
Is this something that's built in the deep packet inspection, or do you have to actually manually go and make this capability possible in your FortiGate?
So the capability to do this is no additional cost. So the biggest pain in SSL certificate decryption, or sorry, SSL decrypt, is getting the certificate to the end user device. So a lot of organizations will use Intune or Jamf as an MDM, and you can take the certificate off of the FortiGate, put it into Intune or MDM to push down to devices, which will put it into their browser. And once you have it in the browser, you can apply that SSL deep inspection to individual policies. So you don't have to do it for all of your traffic. You can pick and choose which packet or which policies you apply it to.
Okay.
So no additional cost, just a little bit more uplift.
And we have a question here. Can you make exceptions for sites that noticing SSL decryption like banks, etc.?
Absolutely. So let me just quickly show you that I can find the location of where I went to, which was, by the way, the Bridgeville location by me. So we can see exactly which location I chose, right? And I can also see that I chose the franchise here. But you didn't see that on the non-SSL decrypt policy. So if you want to make exceptions, we come back to our SSL inspection profile. You can come down here to the exempt from SSL inspection. So we have specific addresses in here as well as web categories. So things like finance and banking and health and wellness, which you don't necessarily want to inspect and you want to omit from that inspection. So I believe that answers the question, but let me know if it doesn't.
It sounds good.
Okay. And you can also customize how you handle certificate-based situations. So like expired certificates, do you want to keep untrusted and allow, block, or trust and allow? So you can customize how you handle the specific use cases in association with certificates. So again, do you want to see the full packet and payload, or do you want to keep working in this blind state where you're just looking at headers? And with that in mind, how many phishing attacks do you think are getting through your firewall because the payload is invisible? So yes, having the IPS and the AV signatures and applying them are important, but because most of the traffic that's passing through the firewall is encrypted to some level, it's not as effective at stopping attacks because we're not getting to the payload of that packet. So just something to think about. So in the interest of time, I'm going to hightail it a little bit as I've got some stuff I want to make sure I get to and then give you some time for Q&A. So for the organizations that have some OT in their environment, we have OT virtual patching. So what this is it's a method of mitigating vulnerability exploits by leveraging the IPS engine. And you're probably thinking the same thing I did, which is, okay, this just sounds like IPS. So it's IPS, but it takes it a bit further. So in our OT subscription, we have the ability to turn on device detection. So we can take a look at devices that are connected to our network downstream, and we can identify based off of behavior what kind of device it is and what operating system it is. So based on that operating system, we can identify which vulnerabilities are associated to that operating system, and then we can suggest IPS signatures to match it and to protect those downstream devices until you can go patch that device. So for instance, if you've got something like a building automation system, or you've got an HMI controlling your OT environment that maybe can't take downtime, or in most cases doesn't even have a patch yet, to be able to protect your environment, we can leverage virtual patching to at least match against an IPS signature until you can get to the point where you can properly patch that system, which at the end of the day is the suggested solution for any vulnerability. So that is an option with our OT virtual patching capabilities. So if any of you are running OT environments, it may be something to take a look at. Okay, so now to some kind of cool stuff. So perpetual trial licenses. And yes, there is an asterisk, and I'll explain why. So perpetual trial licenses. If you have a support account with us and you go to support downloads and VM images, you can come down here and choose a couple different VM images that you can deploy in your environment on your associated hypervisor. So what these allow you to do is something like FortiManager, where you can deploy an OVA and you have the capability to manage up to 3 FortiGates or VDOMs in FortiManager. So it is a trial version, but again, you're limited to 3 FortiGates or VDOMs. It also does not have support associated with it. So if you try to call into TAC, they'll politely turn you down. But it allows you to experiment cost and risk-free with some of our products. And again, I have some links up here to things like our FortiGate VM trial, FortiClient EMS, and FortiManager. And then again, you can come into the VM images portion of the support site and download that for no cost. And again, these are perpetual, but there are feature limitations. So I wanted to at least make sure that you're aware of that. Additionally, if you are curious to maybe a different product that doesn't exist in the perpetual trial VM licenses, we do have a lot of our solutions posted on cloud marketplaces like AWS, Azure, and GCP. But if you don't necessarily have a presence in those cloud providers and you're curious to try a feature or a product, you can always reach out to myself, Jason Lee, or your Fortinet account rep, and we can get you a trial version of that feature or that product. So if you're willing to kick the tires and you want to give it a shot, just let us know and we'll hook you up.
Yep, you can respond to me or to your DES account manager as well.
All right. Okay. So I wanted to mention our fast track. So I'm going to try and put together a fast track, which is essentially a 2 to 3 hour block of time, which is 30 minutes or less of theory. And then the remainder of that time is labs. So what you end up doing is you end up running through use cases where you do things like, in this case, I'm looking at just the Fortinet network security intro fast track. We have over 30 to choose from, but this is just to kind of kick the tires and get your feet wet with it. But you're doing things like basic routing and firewall policies and applying security profiles, and then doing things like some basic CLI or local user authentication. And it's just running you through those use cases so that you can put what we've talked about today into action and into practice. So we also have customers that'll come in, and after they do the 2 hours worth of labs, you can go in and you can just try and break it. I've seen it happen, and it's just a consequence-free way of seeing what you can do with the FortiGate Analyzer or other products that we have.
Yeah, and to that effect, I'm going to issue a poll now, and it basically asks you, would you actually want to do this 2 to 3 hour of lab training, and would you prefer to do it in person? We can find a space downtown Pittsburgh, somewhere easily accessible, or online, depending on how you work better. So have a little look, and let me know if you see the poll.
You may have to click on the polls
Okay.
at the bottom right of your screen to get that to pop up.
All right. Keep going. I'll get it up.
Okay. All right. So the final thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is our Security Operations Center as a Service, or SOC as a Service. So SOC as a Service is a managed service that Fortinet offers for customers. It's priced based off of the FortiGate that you own, so it's like a percentage of the cost of the FortiGate. We have had this offering for a while, but we haven't really opened it up to everybody until recently. For our K through 12 folks, it is 100% E-rate eligible. So definitely worth thinking about, and I'll explain the benefits of it here. So in the current environment, we have things like our expanding attack universe, right? We've got BYOD devices, OT and IoT devices that are joining our network. We have multi-cloud environments that we're looking into, and we have ever-growing users, web applications, and different forms of identity. In addition, we also have maturing threats from things like ransomware as a service and cloud risks and new vulnerabilities that are coming out, and constant exploits that are bombarding us. And then additionally, to make it even harder, we add the complexity of the web and the alert volume and skill shortages, or even the human element shortage. We just don't have enough users or folks on our team to be able to do everything that we should be doing. So 41% of executives say they don't feel their security has kept up with digital transformation, and that's just because you are demanding a lot from users to try and secure everything at the same rate that business wants to transform. So currently, we're seeing that in order to detect an event, it takes about 21 days on average, if at all. In addition, it takes about 8 hours to triage the alerts in investigation, and then 4.2 hours on average to respond. So that's a lot of time to potentially have dwelling in the environment for data exfiltration or privilege escalation to get into different parts of your network, right? So 21 days, it's a long time. So how does SOC as a service work? So SOC as a service is meant for your users to take back their time. So this is 24/7, 365 monitoring of FortiGate logs and alerts that are sent to a FortiAnalyzer that then our SOC as a service team ties into. And what this is meant to do is to reduce employee burnout and recapture critical work cycles. So instead of alert fatigue and trying to jump through all the logs that you're getting and track them down and determine, hey, is this a false positive? Is this real? What's going on? What are my next steps? This is where SOC as a service comes into play. They will do the log and alert monitoring and triage for you. So this is 24/7 global support and coverage with live humans, the follow the sun model, just like TAC and other organizations. So we have a dashboard that's very kind of all-inclusive, right? It's telling you things by alert by status and severity. And then it also applies things like SLA. So based off of events and event types, there are SLAs in which to respond or take action. So what does it actually look like when an alert comes in? So there's an example of an alert here. It's changed a little bit since this slide came out, but it still provides the same information, right? It explains what's happened, why, what the impact is, and it even gives you the steps to remediate. So if an alert comes in and it is something that cannot be triaged solely by the SOC as a service team, they'll reach out to you by phone, email, or SOC as a service cloud portal. And then we have SLAs based off of P1 through 4 severity. And it just helps to limit the amount of alerts that you're going to have to respond to, right? And if it is bad enough where they're reaching out to you to say, hey, we can't resolve this just specifically through our portal, and hey, we may need you to do something from your domain controller or maybe your DHCP server, something along those lines, they'll reach out to you and give you some next steps. And in fact, a lot of our customers and partners will actually use this tool and this communication with the SOC as a service analyst to help train junior analysts to get more familiar with the FortiGate and how to respond to specific alerts, right? So you're going to have interaction with the top FortiGuard engineers that we have that are taking a look at these alerts and responding to them, and then also telling you why they're responding to them in such a way and what those steps are to remediate it. So you're getting best practices through practice. And then in addition, we have the capability to do out-of-the-box reporting and customizing it depending upon your needs. So if you have some upper management that wants to see very specific output from these logs, you can work with the FortiGuard SOC as a service team to create those custom reports. And in addition, you do get quarterly meetings with Fortinet engineers to talk through, hey, this is what's happened over the last quarter. Here's some hardening tips that we have and overall improvement into your fabric so that you keep progressing towards a secure footprint. So with all that being said, and me probably talking too much.
This was fabulous. Okay, so I already got thanks from the chat how insightful and how useful information is. So go ahead, put down any questions. I will be sending out a little survey afterwards to see whether you actually indeed did learn new things on this webinar. Let's kick off with one question. Is you never mentioned 2 letters in this whole thing, AI. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. So does FortiGate have AI capabilities to make your life easier and to detect threats faster?
Yeah. So the FortiGate itself uses artificial intelligence to help create some of those IPS signatures as well as other signatures that we use to keep our signatures up to date. Where AI really starts to shine in our fabric is in the FortiAnalyzer, where we send logs to FortiAnalyzer, and then we take a look historically at the source, and we determine based off of that source and the communications that it has if we think, hey, this is potentially malicious or not, and we can notify you to say, hey, we, based off of the intelligence that we have and the analysis that we've run on this specific source over the past, I don't know, 2 weeks. We believe that this is compromised and that you need to take a look at it. So artificial intelligence does play a role in that, and we are integrating it into a lot of our offerings and products.
All right, one question was from a little earlier. What are your thoughts on running IPS on outbound traffic as well as inbound rules?
So that's a really good question. And we do suggest to run IPS both inbound and outbound. And the reason being is there are signatures that we can get on outbound traffic that can help us determine specific vulnerabilities and exploits within your environment. So best practice is to run them both internally or internal focused as well as destination focused.
Cool. I don't see any more questions, so I'm just going to put a nice little emoji because I thought it was wonderful and I want this to be on the recording. And if anybody else would like their emoji on the recording, go right ahead. And with that, we will end the event and say thank you everybody for joining us.
Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a good day. Bye-bye. Look at those emojis coming. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, bye-bye.